Gaming mice look kinda steel. They either have a really bland, boring plastic body or a holy one these days. And then there's the Lofree Hypace. If there's one thing I can give it props for, it's being unique. It's quite a nice looking gamer style gaming mouse, but it's not too vulgar, and you're free to disagree as to whether you like it or not, but you definitely can give it props for being unique. The body is made of plastic panels, and inside it has a magnesium chassis, almost like a fancy car, and it results in a mouse that is reasonably light at 47 grams, especially because it's quite a long and big mouse in terms of volume, but with great, really solid build quality and virtually zero flex, not to mention no trypophobia inducing holes, just a couple of strips here and there. Now, shape is king, of course, with really any gaming mouse, and what you get here is essentially a really low-profile, egg-shaped gaming mouse, one that feels kind of like a longer, flattened G304. It's quite a flat mouse, with the peak of the hump only being 33mm tall, which is really, really low, and the low click height is also very comfortable. The hump is extremely gentle and unobtrusive, and the long mouse contacts my whole palm very, very well. It's not super supportive in terms of its shape, but it does extend all the way of my palm, so it does give contact, albeit not being very puffed up and holding my palm in place, which you might or might not like. The sides are slightly flat at the front, and they angle outwards ever so slightly, and they kind of flare out into a curved, puffy rear at the back of the mouse, kind of like a sleeker, narrower, longer G302. It's got a similar ethos and similar flow in the way the shape is designed. This puffy area supports the rear of my thumb and my forefinger pretty well, especially when it's arched in a relaxed claw grip or a fingertip grip, but it does feel a bit weird if you're trying to have your fingers flush against the sides of the gaming mouse. This means that for most claw grips, it feels pretty good, though I like it more for normal and aggressive claw grips over relaxed claw grips, and fingertip grip is possible if your hands were bigger than mine. As for palm grip, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it is doable, especially if you don't mind how the shape blends out at the sides. Overall, this shape is pretty nice. It's kind of a shape designed to be flexible, to give your fingers and hand like comfort and freedom to just hold the mouse however you want, as with most egg-shaped mice. It's not particularly supportive, but it's sleek and unassuming, which is what a lot of people who like the G304, the G302, or the G303 generally prefer. Now, if you are one of those people that like that kind of egg-shaped mice, and you want something that's a bit longer, sleeker, and bigger, the Lofree Hypace might be the right shape for you. Now, as for size recommendations, my 19.5cm hands actually feel a little small on this mouse. They're barely big enough to fingertip grip it, so I recommend that if you're fingertip gripping this, your hands gotta be bigger than mine to enjoy it, so bigger than 19cm long. And for claw gripping, my hands feel perfectly fine, so you should be able to enjoy claw gripping this mouse if your hands are roughly bigger than 17.5, 18 centimeters. As for palm grip size recommendations, my 19.5 centimeter long hands are almost too big for this, so I would say that like my hand size of 19 to about 20 cm will be the biggest hand length that I would recommend for palm gripping this. An issue I do have with this mouse though is the weight balance. It makes this mouse feel a lot heavier than it actually is. Even though it is completely legit, Lofree didn't lie about that weight, it's 47 grams. And that's because of the weight balance. If you pick up this mouse, it kind of feels rather front heavy, like tips forward a little bit. And that's because the circuitry and everything in the battery is all the way in the front of the mouse. And because of the mouse being so long, the CG is really a little disproportionate. This results in the mouse feeling a lot heavier since the center of gravity is more forward, so the weight and the friction is acting at a further point away from the pivot, your wrist and your arm. It sounds a little confusing, but essentially, if the weight is further from your wrist, it's going to feel heavier. The mouse feet don't feel too slow though, and that's good, and it has an average friction level. Another issue I have with this mouse is the plastic finish. Now, it's too slippery, and you really will need grip tape with the Lofree Hypace, though it doesn't come with any. The clicks though are really solid. Lofree doesn't actually list anything about these switches online, but I think it's mechanical because there's no indication that it's optical, not to mention I haven't ever tried an optical switch that feels like this, and it's quite a heavy switch at 60 grams actuation force. I don't know what brand the switches are, but if I had to guess, I would guess Huano probably, or TKC, because it's a very short throw and super sharp click, which actually reminds me of most Huano clicks out there. Now it's good, and there is literally no pre or post travel, and it's super consistent throughout the click, but I think it's a bit too heavy for my liking. The scroll wheel is kind of, it's a little too mushy, it's a little kind of like resistant, but it's fine. As for the thumb buttons, it's kind of weird. They look great, sticking out in bright orange as part of the aesthetic, and they are really quite sharp and crisp with no real pre or post travel, but because they stick out without any plastic supporting the sides and holding it in place like guide rails, you can actuate these thumb buttons in more ways than one. You can press it up, press it down, press it forward, and depending on how hard you do those things, you can actually press the thumb buttons. This means that it's easier to bump it by accident, but it also kind of like allows you to press the thumb buttons with more flexibility, and you can kind of just press it up or press it down if that is what is better for your gameplay and your grip. So it could be a pro, it could be a con. I personally just think it looks cool, and it really isn't a big deal for me. Performance of this mouse though is fine. It's as good as expected basically for a wireless gaming mouse at its price range these days, which is 8000 Hz polling rate, Nordic MCU, picks up 3950, great stuff, no latency. The battery also lasts really well too, and at 8000 Hz it does live up to its promised 17-hour battery life. So, should you buy the Lofree Hypace? At $109 on Kickstarter, it's not the cheapest gaming mouse, but it's also not particularly expensive, especially for something that has magnesium in it, looks so cool, and is actually a genuinely unique product from someone that is making a gaming mouse for their first time. But while I can say at a roughly $100 price tag, this is a gaming mouse you definitely can consider, especially if you like egg-shaped gaming mouse. I will be very hesitant in recommending a Kickstarter simply because it's just not worth the risk. I would rather just wait for general release and pay a little bit more if that's even the case at all. But yeah, this gaming mouse is a solid choice to consider. I mean, egg-shaped mice are kind of not that common nowadays. So for people who are like coming from a G304, for example, a very popular wireless gaming mouse, this shape is, in my opinion, going to be excellent. Not to mention that this is actually just a solid shape all around that's quite well executed. And I do respect Lofree for genuinely making a unique new product that really feels fresh, that looks cool, and is unique with a couple of really unique selling points going for it. If this video was helpful, subscribe.